I have a question for you. What if we're wrong? Well, no, let me make it more personal. What if you're wrong? What am I talking about, right? And I was watching a minister on television a couple of days ago speaking to his church, to his congregation. And he was very emphatic about folks that are going to hell. The folks that are not doing exactly what his particular religion, denomination, insists that you must do to avoid going. And of course he was being affirmed because he was speaking at his own church. But again, the question, what if he's wrong? What if I'm wrong? What if you're wrong? And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, because we know who wants to be wrong. Nobody wants to be wrong. And so what it really takes, is real soul searching and investigating and thinking, to find truth. Jesus said that the truth will make you free. The truth will make us free. And so who is Jesus speaking to? I would think that since we're reading it in the Bible, reading the Gospels, that Jesus is saying the truth will make you free, he must be speaking to people who are already believers, those people that were listening to the words that he was speaking. So he was already speaking to his disciples. He was already speaking to believers, and he was telling them the truth will make you free. And so if we embrace the words of Jesus humbly, we'd recognize that he was talking to us. The truth will make us free, and we should never come to a point where we're no longer seeking truth. And if we're seeking truth, when you receive a truth, the reality of that truth refutes the truth that was held before that truth was revealed and hopefully embraced. And so, for me personally, some of you know I'm a mailman in the city. That's my job. And my route is a little over 6 hours long. And what I learned a long time ago was it could get pretty depressing sometimes thinking about the end of the route when I'm at the beginning of the route, okay? So what I learned over the years was that not to consider where I'm supposed to end up. That if I just start here and go to the next house and go to the next house, if I just walk where I'm supposed to be walking, dealing with what I'm faced with at that moment, that I'll end up where I'm supposed to be. And I believe it's the same thing, with our religion. We need to look at it as believers, since that's what we're talking to right now, basically, are Christians, those that embrace Jesus. Is that there's a lot of stuff here in this Bible, okay? And to be honest with you, a lot of the stuff in this Bible are the things that separate the denominations from each other. Now, we're all supposed to be Christians, and most of us, and we're Protestants, those of us that are not Catholic at all. But we're divided in so many different denominations based on, how we interpret certain things that we read. And then when we preach them in our churches, we preach them, our particular opinions, our point of views, as biblical fact. And it's very interesting. We have to be wiser than that. Even in most of our lifetimes, I'll be 50, this year, and those that are a little bit older than me, or even a little bit younger than me, we can probably, if we've been in this religion for a while, we've seen the changes, even in the message. The facts that were known by the preachers, I came up in a church where if a woman wore lipstick, she was going to hell. If a woman wore pants, she was going to hell. If a woman wore earrings, she was going to hell. It wasn't much about a man, but there's a whole bunch of things, You couldn't go to the movies. You couldn't go to the bowling alley. You couldn't listen to secular music. You couldn't do all kinds of things, or you'd go to hell. And most of the folks in those religions now, in those particular denominations and sects, don't hardly believe a lot of that. Because they recognize, I remember I was in a church, it was a while back, some years ago, less than 20 years ago, And there was a preacher, an old-time preacher, and he was preaching, and I wasn't a mailman at the time, but he was preaching that the mailman, if he wears shorts, he's going to hell. You know, men weren't supposed to wear shorts, and everybody was amening this guy and shouting and jumping around because what this man was preaching, they sort of affirmed that for that particular time. But as we grow in this, and we grow in relationship with God, and we grow in understanding and some wisdom and a little bit of sense, and even as our society begins to change, we recognize that things change, that value systems change, and we recognize years later that there were certain things that we may have believed or bought into that were not quite correct. And we freely and we readily admit that. And so you consider that, even consider that right now. What kind of things, if you were raised in church, even as a child, years and years ago, a lot of the beliefs and a lot of things that were bought into, some of those things now you recognize may not be exactly correct. Amen. And so if you recognize that, the question is then in 20 years from now, what will the things that were insisted upon today will be recognized and realized as not being exactly correct, in all humility? There are so many things. We have believers today, you know, even speaking of the rapture, that's not really going to be a rapture, some of them. That's going to happen here on earth, you know, and simply that, you know. There's some that believe that the Christians are going to be taken out of the scene before the tribulations. There are certain Christians that believe that Christians are going to have to go through the tribulation and you know, try to survive and be well. I remember when I first came into this thing, I was in corporate America, and I was meeting with some guys in corporate America like every Tuesday. It was the Christian lunch, you know. He was a real intelligent brother. He was a programmer, and he had been a Christian way longer than I had. I was a new convert, and but I had been raised in the church, and he was really nervous and afraid because he felt when the tribulation came and he had to go through it, he wasn't going to be able to make it because he realized he wasn't that strong in it, and it really had him down. He was suffering every day, you know, just thinking about how he was going to deal with the tribulation. And I was like, you know, very smug and sort of arrogant. Like, you're not going to have to go through the tribulation because, you know, Christians don't have to. Yes, they do. So there was a battle right there. But the reality is, who really knows? What we've chosen to believe is simply that. What we've chosen to believe, what we've chosen to embrace, we've just chosen to embrace. We don't know. We don't believe. Some of us believe and some of us don't. But what we believe, whether we have to or not. So it's all about believing and about the choice to embrace, and often what we choose to embrace is what we were raised to believe, you know. I remember once, and I don't even remember the situation, but I was speaking with some folks about a particular principle, a biblical principle or point of view that I had, and they laughed me to scorn, you know, like Jesus. they laughed me to scorn because I was around like 4 or 5 believers that all believed the same thing. We're out of the same church. So when I was telling them a particular opinion, you know, they thought it was ridiculous. But, you know, if I was in another circle and another group of people, believers that embraced what I believed, and there was only one of them, the majority would have embraced my point of view. It's simply what we've all chosen to believe. And we need to recognize that in all humility, there's a lot that we don't know much of. We've chosen to believe, and it's very detrimental. It could be very detrimental to the well-being of certain believers or even potential believers when we spout, you know, certain things as being biblical fact when it's simply what we've chosen to believe and embrace. You know, what will send a person to hell? I know when I came up, it was listening to a 45 or going to a movie. Or the mailman wearing shorts or a lady wearing earrings. I mean, come on now. So we need to be very careful and recognize that we're not God. The book of Romans, we're told, who are we to judge another man's servant? We have enough time on our hands occupied judging ourselves and trying to be well, in all honesty. And in reality, even in areas of judgment where we've condemned certain folks that, oh, they're definitely going to hell. Anytime anyone, you know, is so positive someone else is going to hell, they are assured that they are not. So in a sense, they're using themselves as a righteous counterbalance, and we can't do that. God is God. God is the judge. God is the one who makes those type determinations. We have enough time on our hands being occupied getting